What's up, Fish Sauce family? It's Wilson.
And Elton, and we're back with a fresh episode of Fish Sauce.
Join us on a journey into the minds of successful founders, operators, and investors.
As we learn more about their secret sauce, we hope you find yours too.
It's our second speaker of our three-part LA series, and this week we have special guest Eva Ho, the partner at Fika Ventures, which is a venture capital firm located in LA.
Eva was also an entrepreneur in residence, EIR, for the city of Los Angeles in partnership with Mayor Eric Garcetti. She's definitely qualified to have an opinion on the future of technology in Los Angeles.
Eva's positive attitude in the eye of a challenging upbringing is one of the most humbling ones we've ever heard, and it's inspired us to be super grateful.
She moved from a farm in Mozambique to the projects in Boston and spent all of her time balancing school and 40-hour work weeks working at her parents' Chinese restaurant as a waitress while also doing their taxes.
And how do we meet Eva? Well, right after recording with Mike in our last episode, by the way, rewind it back if you haven't heard his one yet, he immediately recommended Eva, and after reading the first article that came up on Google, we said, hey Mike, you gotta get this intro for us. So thank you, Mike.
What's Eva's secret sauce?
Stay tuned to find out.
We're so inspired by the LA Times article that featured you and kind of shared your story from growing up in China to moving over to the US and then starting your own venture fund, Eva Ventures, and then now Fika Ventures. Can you tell us a little bit about the background behind that story?
So I was born in Guangzhou, which I think both of you have some connections to. And then I actually moved to Africa when I was little, and I grew up in Mozambique, which a lot of people haven't even heard of. But there was a war, and I came over as a refugee to the US. So I share that only as some context for defining sort of who I have sort of become and what I've chosen to focus on. When my family of 6 moved to the US, we had $99, like no exaggeration. And my dad was already in his early 50s, and we start all over again in Boston. We were on welfare for 2 years, and then we ran a small restaurant because my dad was really embarrassed to be on welfare. We were farmers in Africa, so I think the entrepreneurial blood was always in him. We ran a small restaurant, and I started working there when I was 11, doing accounting and all sorts of various things. So throughout middle school, high school, I basically worked like 40 hours a week while I was going to school full time. And that taught me a lot later on. For me, the definition of hard work is just very different than everybody else. When I went to college, our restaurant burned down. And in that entire time, we were living in the housing project. So since we moved to the US, we were lucky that the social services put us in housing projects. It was a terrible place to live, but I was very grateful for it because it allowed my family's sort of roof over our heads and stuff like that. But when I was in college at Harvard, there's such a dichotomy of living in Cambridge, and above me was actually the Prince of Denmark and all these amazing people who've seen the world. And my family, only a few miles away, was still living in basically squalor. When we lost a restaurant, my parents became unemployed. And all that shaped sort of my career trajectory, and not often in a premeditated way, if you want to call it. I was supposed to go to med school, but because everything happened in the family, I had to just take my first job out of college that paid the most. Back then, it was a job that paid $32,000 a year. Luckily, it was an interesting job.
What was the job?
It was in a market research, like a quantitative firm that was a spin-off of McKinsey, and it's called Marketing Planning Systems. I did that for a couple of years, went back to business school, but that put me in the trajectory of business versus healthcare and medicine, which looking back, I don't know whether it's a good or bad decision. It was just a decision point. And then through many things, several interesting startups, I landed in venture about 5 years ago. But before venture, I had been part of a founding team at Applied Semantics, which created AdSense, sold that to Google in 2003. This was the time of pre-IPO Google, so it was a very interesting time to be there. And then
Is that how you knew Gokul, or that's not related to that?
That's exactly right. So Gokul was part of the AdSense team. He ran the AdSense team.
He's like the godfather of AdSense.
Yeah,
like
he
to
is.
call him. By the way, Gokul was one of our first anchor for our first season. That's why we mentioned him.
Yeah, I can't say any higher sort of things or better things about Gokul. He was a mentor to so many people, including myself, and it seems like he's been for you.
Yes, definitely.
He's a true lifelong learner and impressive on so many fronts. But in 2008, I had the itch to start something new. And it was also a very sort of in an Asian family, a very radical decision to leave a cozy place like Google. I had moved over to YouTube. I was heading marketing at YouTube, and everything was up and to the right. But I really felt like it was time for me to step off the Google brand and redefine my identity a bit of not just Eva and Google, because I was always like the girl from LA, early Google employee, wore my Timbuktu bag. And people thought of Eva equals like the LA Google girl. And I wanted to just do something new. So I went and started a healthcare company and then a big data company. So
Very cool. Just a quick note. Yesterday we were talking to Elizabeth Yen, and she actually did the same departure from Google to doing her own thing.
yes.
And same thing for my brother too. He was at Google for 5 years, and eventually he left to try to like work on something small.
Oh, interesting.
And it's a hard departure for many Googlers because it's so comfortable there.
It's very true. Very true.
But we have a different question to start with as the next question. So Elton and I were born and raised in LA, but we spent a lot of time in San Francisco, and specifically in the Tenderloin. Elton actually lives in Tenderloin.
That's even better.
You proud, Elton?
I am proud. I gotta live it in the weeds. So in order to understand everything.
No, seriously, like I was staying over at Elton's for like a week, just doing interviews, and when we walk out, there's a lot of stuff on the ground. It's not the prettiest, and it's due to many reasons, and there's homelessness. It's not a really pretty place, but there's potential, right? And we want to hear about how is homelessness being addressed, whether it's SF or in LA specifically, since you've been here for a while, and you were EIR for the city of LA. Were you working on any projects that address homelessness, and do you think that any startups are working on that problem right now?
I mean, homelessness is such a giant problem for so many cities, and sadly it's getting worse as tech companies. I mean, it's this weird parallel of the rich getting richer and the tech companies doing really well, but then you have a lot of these social issues, homelessness just being one. LA is interesting in that as a city, we've done really well over the last 5 years, from capital coming in, from startups getting going, from startups exiting. So from a tech perspective, LA is having basically of a golden era right now.
Snapchat, other VCs, etc.
Correct. But with that, it's attracted a lot of people coming in, including a lot of Asian money and driving up property values. So now, I'm not sure if you guys have seen, the median house price is over $600,000. This is LA County. So this includes a lot of the peripheral cities. We're not talking about the Brentwoods and the Pacific Palisades, which is nuts, right? If you think about 600,000 plus, like if you're a teacher, a firefighter, a small business owner, like how the heck would you afford that? So what has happened is a lot of people are losing their homes, and as well as even with the metro coming in, a lot of the areas that are at the various stops are being gentrified. Some good, a lot of it not so good. So the city, as well as a lot of the big local foundations, nonprofits, have been working on preserving some of these communities and making sure people from very diverse socioeconomic backgrounds can actually stay here and live, not only live, but hopefully to thrive. But the issue is facing this kind of interesting inflection point. And even for entrepreneurs like the Bay Area, if we don't keep the quality of life up here high, if traffic gets worse, if various costs of living gets higher, you can't afford to hire an engineer, we're going to face a lot of the issues that the Bay Area currently is I think really struggling. I think the Bay Area is also hitting their inflection point and their peak. And I think the interesting things, not all good will happen to the Bay Area. So homelessness is just one of the sort of the aftermath of, or a outcome of some of these changes. In terms of LA, I think what we've done that's interesting is we passed two major bills. One was the Triple H bill last November, where we raised over $1 billion for housing to build real housing. So we think one of the big solutions is there's a lot of ancillary services that we could do, but fundamentally these people need homes, and if the supply of affordable homes is low, they will always be on the streets.
Is that the root cause, just affordability of homes?
That's one of the root causes, but there's also just a lack of mental illness services and various other things. So the population of homelessness in LA is very, very diverse. You have women who are abused. You have the LGBT community and teens who may have been rejected by their families. We have the typical veterans. I mean, it's as diverse as it can be. So people think, well, homeless people, they're just like drug addicts, or that they actually want to be on the streets because LA is sunny and they want to live on the beach. That's really not the truth. A majority of people do not want to be homeless and have real issues. And so I think a lot of them are just, they miss a job or two, and then this happens. So building homes is really one of the crux of, we think, one of the major points for solving this. So we got the $1 billion Triple H bond, and then in March we passed another bill to raise, using a percentage of our state tax to basically fund a lot of the ancillary services like the shelters, medical care, supplies, things like that. So I think now LA has more money than it's ever had. We'll see whether we'll use it well.
Can the private sector help in any way? Given your experience in venture, have you seen any startups that are essentially helping this cause?
There's a lot of good intent and a lot of enthusiasm, given homelessness is an issue that touches everybody. Like you walk out of your Tenderloin, you can't help but face it, right? So it's a very visceral issue. So people want to help, and I think the conversation is happening and the education is happening in terms of real things that have happened. there's been some initiatives, but it hasn't been massive yet. But the LA tech community is really tight. And I think in talking to a lot of the big leaders, they want to do something. So at least I think the trajectory is we're moving forward to the tech community not only being involved in issues like homelessness, but just overall civic issues. Because LA has always traditionally had a big issue with philanthropy. We don't have the Mark Zuckerbergs as we do up north. So I think it's really coalescing the community and saying, like, what are some of the big things we can focus on and keeping those philanthropic dollars in LA versus going back to your college out east or something else.
Awesome. So you're a very unique speaker of ours and guest of ours because you also work with Mayor Garcetti, who has a huge future ahead of him. We're just curious, what has your experience been in terms of working within the office? And what do you recommend to those who might be pursuing a tech and private practice or thinking about going into potentially government in the future?
It was a very eye-opening role in that, like many Asian immigrants, I was not very involved in anything political. Not in college. I barely voted when I had a chance to vote. I mean, I'm embarrassed by it now. But
why is that? Why do Asian people, what you said, typical?
I think a lot of folks who just moved to the U.S., they are just busy with their own lives, and they're very sort of busy with building their own business and surviving, and a lot of them are working in restaurants or laundry or whatever. So I think a lot of those folks, their language isn't very strong, so the parents are not like going out and voting. So the next generation of kids are just less involved. We have very low turnout for voting from Asians in California. So that was my experience. Like my family, my parents don't speak any English, by the way, to this day. So we didn't read American newspapers. We weren't focused on American politics. And it wasn't the theme in our household to say, hey, grow up and get a job in the government. It was like, grow up and be a doctor, grow up and be a lawyer, get something super stable, which is what, before we started the podcast, we're sharing that this is the sort of the meme in Asian families. So I think I never had that aspiration. I didn't think getting a political job was something honorable. When this chance came up to work with Mayor Garcetti, I felt he was just such a draw as a political figure, right? He's in his mid-40s, he's a Cuban Jew, and he just has such an impressive background and a track record of doing good things and doing good things in LA. So I thought it was a unique chance to serve with him. And LA is so special to me and has been so good to me over the last 15 plus years. I thought it was an opportunity to do something good for the city. And it was overall a really good experience. I think it opened my eyes to the importance of government in our everyday lives and how a city of 10 million, a county of 10 million people, how it all runs, and the importance of these various roles, and the importance of the tech community needing to have a narrative and a conversation with the city. Because in the past, it was like the tech community was doing our own thing, and they're like, we'll interact with the city when we have to pay our taxes, or we have to get some regulatory thing passed. Like WeWork, I think a lot of these interesting businesses around hospitality and logistics, transportation really was just like, I only deal with the government because I have to, because we're dealing with certain issues. But now I think we have a friendlier relationship with the government and understanding we could work together collaboratively on lots of various things. So it was a very positive. And for folks who are thinking about it, I always say for young folks to get involved in the nonprofit as well as in the civic capacity, because it'll open your eyes to the fact that there's a lot more different types of people out there who need various things. And as smart folks like you two, you can actually do a lot by just giving a little bit of time, a little bit of money, and sort of rallying the community around you to do some of this work. Because without you, we literally cannot move forward.
You seem very bullish on LA right now. Elton and I are both born and raised in the LA area. Me from San Gabriel Valley area, Elton, Diamond Bar area. We moved to New York for jobs, right? Then we moved to San Francisco for tech jobs. And now we find ourselves kind of in LA hearing a lot of interesting things happening. And it seems like a lot more movement and energy and development and capital is happening. I want to hear more from your perspective. Why are you so bullish? What is your thesis in LA and what's driving it?
Well, I hope, I'm really proud that you two got bred here, and I really hope someday you will return in a more permanent way. I know you're in and out with your family. I think it's an incredible city on many levels, but from a tech perspective, I think in the last 5 years, we just noticed a lot of the ingredients that allow for a very fertile tech ecosystem are kind of all coming together, and the infrastructure is coming together. So I think everything from getting a lot of the graduates, I think a lot of people tout the number, we have the biggest number of engineering graduates in the country. We've always had that many engineering graduates, but now they're choosing to stay here versus going to the Bay Area or going to New York or go to Boston for jobs. So that's really, really important. And we have the largest number of technical schools in anywhere in the country. So a lot of our strengths right now are being realized. We have access to the largest largest port in the country. So if you're doing anything in logistics and transportation and commerce, manufacturing, it's all here. The proximities here. So I could go on with the strengths, but there are many, many reasons why LA is really right now the center of lots of things. One interesting fact that a lot of people don't think about is even if you start your company elsewhere like Seattle or San Francisco, when you think about the next biggest market, if you want your product to go mainstream, which is affecting people from all socioeconomic backgrounds, all different races and ethnicities, LA is it. LA is a reflection of the world. Like, we're a true melting pot. So whatever you're building, your second market is most likely going to be LA. So I tell founders, well, why don't you just start it here versus starting in Seattle or San Francisco and then having a satellite office here? Because ultimately, you will be here for you to scale.
So I don't disagree with anything you just said, but why hasn't that happened 5-10 years ago?
Yeah.
The question is, why now? Is there a catalyst that's making it happen right now in the next 5 years?
So I think some of the themes and trends is that we had a lot of good successes early on with companies like Maker and Cornerstone and Demand, even MySpace, right? Like, that has created the MySpace mafia, and a lot of those people have gone on and built interesting things. So when a city has some interesting successes, two things happen. You create wealthier individuals and individuals with skills and leadership skills, and if they choose to stay and reinvest in a community, that's awesome because they'll train the next generation of people. And two, if it succeeds, then more capital comes in. So what you're seeing right now in a dramatic way is a lot of the Bay Area firms are coming to LA and mining, harvesting, learning from our community. So you look at the big companies like Sequoia now has a presence down here, NEA, Excel, you name it, all the big Kleiner. They're regularly sending people down here because they have seen money being made here. That's always the catalyst, right? And then so with that, they're like, well, wow, there's a whole lot of stuff. LA is not only, in the past people think of LA, they think, oh, it's a commerce, it's digital media, maybe ad tech. I would say that was sort of the definition of LA, entertainment. Now there's not a single vertical that LA does not cover. Because we could support a company like SpaceX, Tesla, Hyperloop, hardcore tech, but we could also support companies like the traditional, like Dog Vacays, a marketplace, Honest company. But the unknown companies that people don't talk about is like Blackline. Like, Blackline is a financial company started by, you should have her on the show, by the way. Teresa is she's in her 50s and she started a company that she took public last October. So financial software that competes on the enterprise level. It's like a QuickBooks, but for enterprise. But Teresa has built it from the ground up. When she started 10 years ago, she couldn't get money for her company because she came in. She has amazing bright pink hair. She's just such an inspiration because she couldn't raise money. So back then, a lot of the folks who were trying to raise money here couldn't raise money, so they had to go to the Bay Area. But now people can raise money here, and hopefully people like Teresa will be able. So she didn't raise her round till I think Silver Lake came in like much later stage. All of it was self-supported. All these interesting trends that are happening. So with successes, I think it breeds more capital, more energy, more people, more spotlight. So I think that LA is at a really prime time now.
Really excited.
Yeah, you guys need to come back.
I thought like I was gonna stay in San Francisco for a long period of time, but now I'm like contradicting myself.
Yeah,
we'll see.
We'll see.
There's the LA Times article, and in that article there was a quote that said, "It wasn't until my early 30s that I realized I could stop trying to survive, that I could actually live." At which point were you able to realize that, and what did that mean to you?
Yeah, it wasn't like one specific point, in so much that in my background, if you saw me when I was in my 20s, it would be hard to connect that person with the person today. I think the values are similar, but in terms of just confidence and all that stuff, I just didn't have it. Like, in high school, I never spoke up. So I went to Boston Latin, and I was always the kid, like, I would rather sit in the back of the room. I would just study. And if you called on me, I would like literally shake and sweat. That sort of feeling when I went to college felt the same, because I was in these small study discussions of like 12 people. And literally my greatest fear is being called on, even in college. So in college, because of my family situation, and I was supporting my family financially, working while I was in college too, that I never really participated in the flow of anything. I was basically just existing and trying to get my B+, my A-, and getting through college. I never really was deeply enjoying the amazing people around me, the fact that I was in Cambridge, any of that stuff. And even after college, I think because most of my paycheck that I earned was going back to the family. I was like living in how, you know, when I was at Cornell, I was living in a place with 4 people, and I took the smallest room. I paid $300 a month. That was me, right? So I was always a person that took like the least things, and because of all the various sort of family obligations. So it took me a while to realize that I was really worth anything. And even the story of getting into Harvard, I never wanted to go, because when I got in, my parents were like, well, it's obvious that you go. And I was like, well, I don't want to go. That's not my, like, I'm not going to be comfortable there. Like, I'm going to be so scared. And they're like, well, there's no choice. There was no discussion. It was like, well, you're going to go. So I just never felt I had a choice in life. Like, I chose my job because of my family. Like, all these things were sort of taken away from me, even though I had earned it in many ways. But as I got a little older, my late 20s, and I had my first success with applied semantics, and being around people that really valued me for who I am and who I was, which is like, I would come in, you know, in the office, I wear shorts, and I don't like wearing a suit. So when I was consulting, I felt like, again, I had the wrong clothes, right? I'm like a very petite person, like all these things. Like, I just didn't have in all my reviews, I mean, I just talked to a lot of young women now who are just, you know, in their 20s trying to get going. And a lot of them are quite afraid in their workplace because it's just like they're shy, right? So they're usually mentally very, very sharp. They're always like the smartest, like, analytical person, mathematically really strong. But when it came to giving a presentation, I was always like shaking in my boots. So my reviews were always like, you're super smart. Like, your decks and everything is perfect. But God damn it, like, why don't you speak up when you're with the client? Like, why don't you just have a lot of work? And I always got the B reviews from work because I was like, you're really smart, but you're just so afraid to showcase yourself.
What would you tell your young Eva, or those, you know, people who are in those positions right now? What would you say to them or recommend to them in those positions?
Yeah, I would just say, just is best, and this is not something that's easy. So I could say, hey, be less afraid. But it's a very social psychological thing, right? It's from childhood development. You can't just one day wake up and be like, I'm going to be less afraid and I'm going to speak up in a room. But I tell folks now, young people, not just women, that if you're confident in what you're doing, you don't have to say a lot, but you just have to say the right thing. So my thing right now is, if I'm in a meeting, even with a bunch of often white men, and I would basically just sit there and listen, but I would say one thing that's meaningful and impactful, and suddenly they're like, oh, there she is. Wow, that's really good statement. That's a very different point of view. And suddenly they pay attention to me, because I'm not that like person sitting in the corner, because often people think, oh, she might be the associate, or she might be the operating person, or she might be the secretary. Like, literally they'll look at me like, who is she type of person, especially in venture, right? Or in the boardroom. And I tell young folks now, just in a meeting, you don't have to say a lot, but you just have to say a couple of smart things and really know what the heck you're talking about, and you will get the respect. It's not volume, it's not quantity, it's quality of what you say. So.
Yeah, so Maureen Fan, I don't know if you know her, she's the co-founder, CEO of Baobab,
Cool.
Sort of like Pixar for VR. And she kind of said the same thing when she was going through meetings, or even in class at HBS. Like, her quota was like, at least one comment per meeting, and just like get it out there.
Yeah.
Just raise your hand, get it out there, and like, as long as you have presence, then over time you will probably get used to it.
Correct.
Going back to kind of that transition point, I know you mentioned apply semantics when you were there, that made you feel more confident,
Yeah.
but do you mind sharing a little bit more light and imagery of like what actually made you feel more confident? What was that turning point where you were able to really pursue something that you love doing, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of times, a lot of our peers are trying to find that, right? They're stuck between the decision of pursuing a path that is just conservative, traditional, and safe versus doing something risky, but might be something that is what they're passionate about.
Right.
How does one think about that?
Yeah, so like you two, like I had thought going to business school after I was going to work for Procter & Gamble, or I thought, like, I did an internship there, and it would have been the safest route is to go to Cincinnati and do that. But coming out here to LA, it was almost like kind of random. I landed into applied semantics, and there are the two Caltech founders. What changed for me there is, as a group of sort of the senior leadership, they really respected me and I respected them. I wasn't very technical, but I was with these two very technical guys, but he respected my sort of business acumen, my strategic thinking. So it was nice to be in a room of equals where they treated me like I was an equal, and they actually allowed me to be a CEO there. And I was in my 20s, like I never thought about like I was worthy of becoming a CEO, because I was like, well, I didn't truly found the company. I came in as an employee like 10. But being there and saying, hey, somebody believed in you, right? So that's what I tell young people is like, be part of a group where there are people that want you to succeed and are happy when you succeed and really push you to succeed. you just become a different person. And it was at that moment where I was like, wow, these people actually think I have some great things to add to this company, and they're going to let me take the CEO position. And that was a moment that I changed. It's not probably one seminal moment, it's a series of moments, but that got me to, and then when I was at Google, I was surrounded by wonderful people that only wanted me to succeed and gave me every opportunity to work on whatever the heck products I wanted. So I worked on Google Video, whatever. Like, if I wanted to learn about online video, they're like, Eva, go do it. It wasn't like, oh, Eva, I don't think you should do online video. I want to put you here. It's that freedom, and being part of an organization that gives you that freedom allows you to grow your confidence over time. So it was that whole period that allowed me to sort of gain my voice.
That's awesome. Super inspiring.
We want to know a little bit more what makes Eva today. And I know you touched a little bit about your upbringing in the early days, but we want to, since your upbringing is so interesting, let's dive deep a little bit more.
Today, I focus on very sort of simple thing. Like, I want to surround myself with people and places that make me feel alive. It's a very simple sort of model that I live by. There's limited time. I'm 45. I feel like time keeps going.
You don't look 45.
Oh, thank you. It's the Asian gene. At some point, it's going to cross. I think there's just, I wake up, I think, every day thinking, like, I'm never going to be able to relive this day again. And it's not like I wake up every day, like, consciously thinking about this, but I've always felt that there's so much time that you're on this earth. How can I spend my time that sort of leaving this place a little bit better and really living life in a really rich way? For me, it is a definition different for everyone else. The parts of me that people sort of don't know, or the close friends know, is like, I'm an adventure traveler. So everything I do is slightly to the extreme. So like, I was near the North Pole last year. I went to Antarctica. I do photography, and I like capturing people and profiles. And I travel. That's why I'm going to Burma, because I want to see the place before it changes even more. Mm-hmm. I'm deeply interested in people and cultures all around the world, because I think because of how I grew up somewhere else. Yes, I'm Asian by ethnicity, but I'm more of a nomad, right? Because I'm torn between several worlds of, like, I'm not typically Asian because I didn't grow up in Asia. So I don't have some of that stuff. But my parents don't speak English. We only speak Cantonese at home. But we grew up in Africa. So I'm in this weird place where it's like, where do I belong? I am Asian, but I don't really think of myself in that in an everyday manner. So I like going exploring all these various types of people around the world. I think the combination of that part of my life and I encourage young people to go out and see the world, because you cannot be, I think, a good investor. You cannot be a good leader in corporate America or at various companies unless you see how other people live. Because I think only then will you know what type of products to build, what types of services to design. So I think that for me, like, ethical design, all this is so important to me. I mean, I think I've only gotten that lens by stepping off and getting on a plane and going. And then lastly, I've been focused a lot in the nonprofit and philanthropic area and really thinking about that part. So that's the other sort of piece of my life. Like, yes, I'm a VC. And most people want to ask me about what it's like to be a VC, what it's like to be a woman VC. Mildly interesting, but not deeply interesting. Because I don't see VC as some elite job. I see it as a very privileged profession, and one that I'm actually today, I don't know whether I'm going to be good at. But I think there's other parts of Eva. I think if you really sit down with me, that's a bit more interesting, because I like pursuing lots of other things. I love reading, so I'm constantly reading various things. I'm a learner.
A lifelong learner.
A lifelong learner.
Looking back at your entire career, and from studying biology at Harvard to going to the market research consulting job to going to work at Google and then starting your own venture, is there anything you would have done differently? I know a lot of people are constantly thinking about kind of pivots and transitions and their next step and things like that. What would you tell yourself?
It's hard to say, right? Because I think if I didn't go through those pieces, the trajectory today, might have been somewhere different. Maybe better, maybe worse. I don't know. I think some of the questions, like business school, that's a big question for a lot of young people. Do I go to business school or not? And for me, my business school experience wasn't amazing. But it wasn't the school. It was more me. Like, I wasn't in the mental state to really accept. I just was like, oh, business school. Like, I got there. It felt like everybody was just wanting to get that internship, get that job. And the conversations felt very sort of single-minded. And I came from a college where I had people who were involved in the arts and people who wanted social change. And I could sit down at a cafeteria and have a really interesting conversation about classical history. Versus a business school, I felt people just wanted to mine, well, what interview did you do? But that was Cornell. And so much of it was me, because I certainly could have taken each of those individual conversations in a deeper level and learn more about those folks. But for me, maybe I would not have done business school, but if I didn't, then I wouldn't have gotten to experience Procter & Gamble and learn about Cincinnati and all those good things. So I can't say I would do anything differently. The one thing is a lot of people say, do you do any planning for the future? Like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I don't do any planning. I don't know where the hell I will be in 5 years. I could not have predicted this path at all. So generally, a lot of folks are like, what should I be doing to plan for? I was like, well, just keep doing the things that you love and being around people that are good to you. And making sure that you wake up still feeling excited about the day ahead of you, whatever it might be, whether you want to teach young kids or whether you want to work at WeWork, whatever the heck it is. Make sure you're excited. Not everybody in the world has that opportunity. And I feel privileged to be able to wake up and choose how I spend my day. Most people in the world don't, right? So I think if you're lucky enough to go to a good school and you can actually wake up and say, hey, do I want to go here? Do I want to get a $5 Starbucks? Do I want to meet this person? Dude, you're already like in the upper 0.1% of the world, right? And if you get that gift, do something with it.
So much positive vibes coming out of this conversation. I want to hear more about what your parents think of you now after going through so much. How do they view Eva now? Are they proud of you? Are they, what are they thinking about what you've done so far and what you're going to do in the future?
It's a really good question because I was at a talk at a local company called Tracy, and I was being very honest about it. My parents are super old school. They don't read English. They've never turned on a computer. They've never sent an email. They don't know what the internet is. And they're both second grade educated. So they grew up in the Cultural Revolution. My dad is quite a bit older. And they're amazing people. I wouldn't be here without them. And they've taught me so many great things in life. But often when I go home today, when we have conversations, because my Chinese is quite poor, sadly, my vocabulary is fairly limited, we don't have the deep discussions I would like sometimes with them. And they don't really know what I do every day. They don't drive, so they've never been to when we founded my company Factual. We had the top floor in Century City and one of these amazing buildings. They've never been there. They don't know what I do day to day, right? But that doesn't make them any less proud of me. It's just that I think, and I'm sure you may feel this, first generation folks, they survived to get us here. But once we're a little bit older, it's often hard to be like, hey guys, this is what I do. This is, I went to this nonprofit and I did this. Not that my parents don't care, but we can't have that level of conversation. I'm being very frank with you. Mm-hmm. That's where I feel I miss out with my parents, is when I go home, they say, what do you want to eat? What am I going to cook for you? Which is phenomenal. And I will miss that someday when they're not here. But, they don't really they don't know what venture capital is. They don't know what WeWork is. They've never been into WeWork. They don't know anything about trends. So it's one of these things that's just how they live. They live a very simple life.
Yeah, when I told my parents about WeWork, they thought I was like a real estate broker. I was like, what are you doing leaving? Because I was at Bank of America in Maryland before. And they're like, what? You should not do that at all.
I totally get it. But I'm so glad you did it anyways, right? I wish this was more of a two-way because I would love to hear how your parents see where you are today. Because every Asian parent is different. They're the ones who are second generation where the parents have got the college degrees and they prime their kids as tiger parents to be perfect in everything they do. They're musicians. But then the first generation folks are not like that. So I think people always group us in one lump. I was like, no, my parents never pushed me to learn an instrument. They're like, don't waste your time learning music. Music is useless. It's don't go into the arts. Photography is so stupid. But they've taught me the hardcore values that when I go home, it's nice to go back to the basics, which is sitting around, sharing a good meal, which is what a lot of Asian families do. Mm-hmm. They still want me to wear the slippers, and it's nice. It keeps me very grounded.
Off.
Yeah, shoes off. It keeps me
that was
very
almost our
real.
name for. We have plenty of different brainstorm names, and shoes off was a potential name.
Oh, I like that. Fish sauce is a lot better. By the way. Yeah. And I love the logo, guys. If whoever's listening haven't seen the logo, it is a badass logo.
You can buy a T-shirt online at fishsaucepodcast.com/swag.
You can pay me for that later for that.
Referral fees.
Okay, we are running out of time, but we'll ask our last question that we always do in fine fish sauce fashion.
You made fun of me yesterday, so now
oh god.
It's Saturday morning.
It's
okay.
early.
It's all right.
We woke up at 6:30 a.m. today.
After we flew in at midnight last night.
This fish sauce hustle. Anyway, so in fine fish sauce fashion, what is Eva's secret sauce throughout this whole process? And both, figuratively, what's your secret sauce, and both literally, what's that secret sauce you like to eat?
I don't know if I have a secret sauce in so much the philosophy of just treating people well and always giving back and giving forward. I think in everything I've done, I recognize all these little paths and stepping stones. I could not have done it unless somebody else believed in me, whether it was getting me into college, right? I wasn't your perfect Harvard applicant. I didn't play a sport. I didn't play an instrument, right? But somebody listened to my story and said, hey, this girl might amount to something someday, right? So if it wasn't for that interviewer, that person, and all along, the Applied Semantics team, the Google team, people, my LPs who gave me a shot at being a freaking VC, like all these things, or somebody gave me a shot. And hopefully I could able to do that for somebody else. And because I feel so grateful for that, like I think I try to be good to other people. It seems so simple, but I think often being in the venture community, we're part of the elite of the elite. And I think sometimes we lose sight of how we should be. I like treating founders and others, no matter where you are, no matter what idea you have, with grace and dignity and just respect, because everybody is just at some step in their life. So I don't know if that's a secret sauce or just something I like to live by. In terms of food, like I love food and I love sauces. And fish sauce is one of my favorites. I use it to cook all the time. But I lean towards, I like spicy stuff. There's probably not a sauce that I don't like.
What's the last food that you had spicy sauce on?
Last night, actually, we were making a tuna sandwich. And believe it or not, it's not sexy. But we used some Japanese spices that came back from Tokyo, and we mixed this like light sauce that we put on top of the tuna, and it's actually really, really good. So maybe I add spicy sauce to too many things. Anyways, that
keeps it spicy.
Yeah, it keeps life interesting.
It makes life very spicy.
Yeah.
And fun, so.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Eva, and your inspirational story. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Elton. Yeah. Thank you, Wilson. You guys are phenomenal. So, yeah, I hope everybody who's listening, like, if you get a chance to actually come on this with these two guys, please do. You have a wonderful opportunity to meet two phenomenal people. So, thank you.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Fish Sauce.
If you like what you heard, follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and sign up for our newsletter for the latest updates and special surprises.
Also, treat yourself and a friend to a Fish Sauce t-shirt from our swag store, fishsaucepodcast.com. We can't wait to see you rock it down the streets.
If our mission resonates with you, please leave a review on iTunes, and don't forget to share with your friends so we can welcome them into our Fish Sauce family.
And lastly, big shout out to our awesome editor, Christian Edwards, for making us sound better than we actually are in each episode of Fish Sauce. What's your secret sauce?